Meanwhile, the humanitarian crisis in Gaza grows more dire. This past week, Israeli forces killed 7 World Central Kitchen workers in an attack that they say was a mistake. But many aid groups and European allies, they aren't buying it. Here now to talk more about the aid crisis is Michelle Nunn, President and CEO of CARE USA. Michelle, thank you so much for joining us today. First, what are the biggest obstacles facing aid workers right now?
Well, if you could think of a more difficult humanitarian situation for aid workers, it's hard to imagine. So first of all, you have the siege of Gaza, which means that aid workers are not able to get in some of the things that they normally get in any crisis, everything from satellite phones to basic provisions. And most importantly, we have literally hundreds of aid trucks that are waiting and that cannot get in at the volume that is required and is necessary. On top of that, you have one of the most difficult conflict situations in this century, in the sense that we have, 75, 80% of the infrastructure that has been destroyed or damaged. You have the kind of attacks that continue to happen, like the one here with World Central Kitchen, but that is representative of 200 plus aid workers that have been killed over these last 6 months. And then on top of that, you have a population that has been displaced and repeatedly displaced. And now 1.5 million are gathered in the most dense possible situation in Rafah, with the threat of a incursion that is being threatened every day. So it is a very, very difficult situation for aid workers. Most importantly, it's an impossible situation for the Palestinian civilians who are suffering so greatly there.
And Michelle, you just mentioned the difficult situation it is for aid workers. How do workers prioritize aid in situations like these when there is such a great need for so many people? You said 1.5, all concentrated in Rafah.
Yeah, so I think sometimes it's helpful to think about what would it look like if this was happening in your own community. So imagine that, again, 70 to 80% of the infrastructure or homes are destroyed. Imagine that every single day you were worried about the safety of your children. Imagine that your children and you were down to, say, 1 meal a day, that 1 million people are facing what we call catastrophic hunger. And then imagine that every single hour you were again afraid for what might happen in terms of bombs, in terms of the conflict. You have 90% of schools that have been destroyed, and you, on top of that, have the health infrastructure that has largely been destroyed. So aid is important at every level, but right now we're really prioritizing water, food, shelter, making sure that those basic things are possible. And the only way that that really is going to be able to deliver it at the scale that is required is if we see a ceasefire, the release of the hostages, and the infusion of unfettered aid.
Yeah, such basic necessities there. Now, I know you said that the 7 World Kitchen aid workers were just some of 200 aid workers that have been killed since this conflict began. But how could the attack on the World Central Kitchen change the strategy for aid groups going forward?
Well, I think for all of us, we're concerned about our Palestinian partners who are working every single day to deliver aid, that are risking their own lives. Again, as you said, close to 200 of those aid workers had been killed. And then on top of that, you have this direct attack on the caravan of aid workers from World Central Kitchen. So all of us are trying to determine how we can ensure the safety of our aid workers and deliver the life-saving assistance that is literally keeping people alive at this juncture. So CARE and our partners are continuing to operate there, but what we're calling for is the necessity, the imperative of a ceasefire. And only that will enable us to get the aid in that's required. And by the way, we have an imminent famine that has been declared by those who judge and are experts in examining hunger. And we know that there can be a tipping point. Already we're losing vulnerable populations, children and the elderly, to hunger, to dehydration. And that could tip in very disastrous and consequential ways if we do not get the kind of aid that is only going to be able to provide it if there is a ceasefire.
Michelle Nunn, President and CEO of CARE USA, thank you so much for joining us here today and for your insight.
Thank you, Erin.